Long before the highways and railroads, there was another path, a sacred route reconnecting the tribes, traditions, and spirit of the world. This path, known as the Red Road, stretched from the Northern Territories into Mexico, a lifeline for trade and connection, not just of goods but of sacred knowledge. On this physical road, tribes from the Great Plains to the deserts of the Southwest journeyed south, bartering for materials, exchanging ideas, and connecting through sacred ceremonies. But more than trade, it was a journey of spiritual work, seeking the wisdom of the medicine men and women, carrying rituals between the peoples. Along this red road to Mexico, they traveled with reverence, connecting to their ancestors, to each other, and to the Great Spirit. But this red road is more than just a physical path. To walk the red road is to follow a spiritual path, one of right living, truth, and balance. It is a journey that begins in the east, where the sun rises and the morning star Venus shines brightly, a reminder of renewal and the light of spirit. In Native American traditions, the east is the direction of new beginnings, of clarity and vision. The red road symbolizes this path of life, the road of honor, truth, and respect. Just as the rising sun brings light to the earth, so too does walking this path illuminate the spirit. Today the red road continues to be walked, both in the physical world and in spirit. As we honor the ancient ways, we find that the red road connects us all, to our ancestors, to the land, and to the wisdom carried by the morning light. Whether journeying for trade or turning east to follow the light of the rising sun, the red road is always before us, waiting to guide us on our path. The red road is more than just a path, it's a way of life, past, present, and future. In ancient Mayan cosmology, Kukulkan, also known as the feathered serpent, was a central deity linked to the forces of nature, the cosmos, and human consciousness. Kukulkan is often associated with the planet Venus, especially as the morning star. This connection to Venus symbolizes both spiritual renewal and enlightenment, key themes in esoteric traditions. In Mayan spirituality, the planet Venus holds deep significance. It was seen as a celestial guide influencing both human and cosmic events. When Venus rises just before the dawn, it's called the morning star, or the early light, representing Kukulkan's rebirth and renewal of spiritual energy. This moment, known as the early light of consciousness, marks the transition from darkness, in other words ignorance and unawareness, to light, knowledge, and spiritual awakening. Venus was a powerful symbol of divine timing, representing the cycles of destruction and renewal. The Maya closely observed Venus' movements, believing that when it appeared before the sun, it brought new spiritual insight and opportunity for transformation. The red dawn symbolizes this transformative period where the soul ascends from the mundane world into a higher state of awareness. Kukulkan, as the feathered serpent, embodies the balance of heaven and earth. The serpent, with its roots in the earth, represents physical reality and human life, while its feathers symbolize the divine and spiritual realms. Esoterically, Kukulkan represents the descent of the divine wisdom into human consciousness and the ascent of the soul towards higher realms. When Venus rises, it is as though Kukulkan is guiding the human spirit towards greater enlightenment. For the ancient Maya, the east was considered sacred as it was the direction of the rising sun and Venus. Both the sun and Venus were seen as cosmic forces that activated the spiritual journey. The rising sun symbolizes illumination, vision, and the renewal of life, while Venus, as the morning star, heralded the beginning of a new cycle of consciousness. The red color seen at the dawn in the Mayan worldview was associated with life force, creation, and the opening of the mind and the spirit to new levels of consciousness. Esoterically, it represents the awakening of the inner spirit and the ability to see beyond the material world into deeper realms of existence. The red dawn, or early light, is a call to spiritual warriors to walk the path of truth and enlightenment. Kukulkan and Venus were also tied to the Mayans' understanding of time as cyclical. Venus's movements were meticulously tracked in the Venus calendar, and its appearance as the morning star was thought to signal important spiritual shifts. These shifts were not just astronomical events, but esoteric markers of consciousness. The Maya believed that certain alignments with Venus could open portals for spiritual growth and insight. Just as Venus transitions between being the morning and evening star, so too does the human spirit undergo cycles of transformation, death, and rebirth. Kukulkan's association with the cycle teaches that through walking the red road, symbolizing spiritual discipline and alignment with cosmic principles, one can transcend the material limitations and reach higher states of consciousness. In esoteric teachings, Kukulkan represents the Kundalini energy, the life force or spiritual energy coiled at the base of the spine, often symbolized by a serpent in many ancient cultures. The ascent of Kukulkan mirrors the Kundalini rising through the chakras, or the energy centers of the body. As Venus rises in the east, so too does the inner energy awaken the higher states of awareness and spiritual insight. Kukulkan, as the feathered serpent, represents this fusion of earthly and divine realms, offering the spiritual seeker the tools for self-transformation. His connection to Venus underscores the importance of cosmic timing and the awareness that spiritual awakening often follows a natural cycle, like the rising of the morning star. Kukulkan's role in Mayan cosmology and his connection to Venus symbolize not just celestial events, but profound spiritual awakenings. The red dawn of consciousness, or the early light, the rising of Venus in the east, represents a time of personal and cosmic renewal, where the individual is invited to rise above the material plane and walk the sacred red road towards spiritual enlightenment. Welcome to the channel and my new playlist, Unraveling Native American Mysteries. What happened to the Native Indians and where did they all vanish to? When we look around, all we see is enigmatic echoes of a long forgotten past. Hi, I'm Trevor if you haven't joined me before. So while creating this first episode of my new playlist, Native Americans, I decided to take the subject into meditation and to receive guidance from Spirit. And as I sat down to meditate, visions started to stream through my consciousness before I even had a chance to ask Spirit for guidance. Within my third eye, visions and scenes of a glorious past unfolded within my third eye. And there before me were the ancient Native Americans, performing rituals, magic, and ceremonies. Not only spiritual and religious magic, but the true magic that was the life and beautiful culture of the Native American Indians, long before the white settlers and forced removals. Now all we see is ruins of what once was. So most people I know are fascinated by the subject of Native Americans. So when I was 6.5, my parents told me we had Indians coming for lunch, and this was a Sunday. So after questioning them, I got quite excited. And in those days, kids used to play cowboys and Indians. So I grabbed my feather headdress, and I put this on and ran to the driveway. We had a fairly long driveway. And I was waiting and waiting for these Indians to arrive. And when I saw the car approach and turn into the driveway, I was quite shocked because I felt betrayed. Where were the Indians that my parents were telling me about? These were Indians from India. I ran back inside and asked them. And they said to me, no, it's not Indians, but it's Indians. Christopher Columbus landed in the Americas, and on seeing the natives, he thought he was in the Indies, and he called them Indians. So over the years, this word was constantly used, Native Indians, and you can see how children become confused. And that word Native Indian is stuck in our minds, and it's still stuck in our minds today. But so we should really call the Native Americans or by their tribal name. The Native Americans would ceremony in sacred places, including the teepees in and around the sacred canyons. So let's look back through the Akashic records of what was taking place, especially from a spiritual standpoint. So in my new playlist, I'm going to attempt to interpret and get some kind of an understanding of the rock art. So as up until today, no one has been able to understand or interpret the rock art symbols. If you don't want to miss out on this, hit that notification button. It's one way that you will get this video. I hope you tune into these future videos and like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed this video. True revival of ancient native cultures will only come when Native Americans embrace the sacred power of plant medicines once more. Welcome to the channel. Hi, I'm Trevor if you haven't joined me before. So some exciting news. The Native American culture is going through a revival, and it will be revived. No other cultures of ancient times can be brought back to life. So let us look at how this is going to happen. Rediscovering of what was once lost. For thousands of years, Native American tribes used plants, herbs, and other elements to enter the spirit world. These rituals were deeply spiritual, and plants were believed to contain sacred spirits that connected the indigenous to the divine and spirit world. So in ancient times, the shamans of old walked the red road, and this red road was the red path that led to the rising sun and the early dawn of the first awakening of humanity. And there in the early dawn was the early light, Venus, and the sovereign Plumed Serpent. Consuming plants, the skilled shaman would enter into a trance-like state or higher state of consciousness, where they were able to communicate with the spirit world and their ancestors, the grandfathers and grandmothers, to seek healing, protection, guidance, and wisdom during their otherworldly journey. The shaman played a central role in the tribe. He was the facilitator, the medium, the channel, and of course, the opener of the portals of light. Most shamans were natural-born clairvoyants and were able to shapeshift. Sacred religious ceremonies were held all over the Americas, and today we're looking here mostly at the Great Plains. On one of my initiations, I was taken into the ancient world and shown exactly what the Native Americans were doing, but not only in America, all over the ancient world. As the higher beings plugged me into the Akashic records, I moved over the Great Plains of America, and there I could see clearly. So in my initiation, as I moved over the Great Plains, I was taken to teepees, and there under the teepees, the shaman was conducting sacred ceremonies with the tribes around the fireplace, all those that entered the sacred portals of light. And as I was taken further, I was taken up to some beautiful places where the Native Americans had kivas. And these kivas were partly structures that were underground and were enclosed on the top. And they were holding these sacred ceremonies within these places. And as I moved further to the beautiful red cliffs of the canyon lands, there were many tribes with huge fires against the cliffs, illuminating the cliffs. Everything was bright red, and there the red path matrix opened, and all the tribe's members were plugged into the matrix of the divine, was taken high up into the mountains and on the buttes of canyon lands. And there were sacred stone structures used as temples for the ancient Native Americans, where they ceremonied at these specific times. Also along the cliff faces, we had the alcoves. Some of the alcoves were suitable for ceremonies. Most of them were used for granaries, for storing food, keeping it safe, and having a fireplace where they were able to make food during the cold seasons. As the ancient ones took me around the ancient world in my initiation, they showed me Native Americans ceremonying in so many different places. and especially in sacred places. Then I was taken to the sweat lodges, and there the Native Americans were burning sacred smoke for purification and protection. And they were consuming certain plants such as peyote. And we must know that they didn't only consume peyote, there were many other plants that could take them into the spirit world. So when consuming these cacti, the plants want something hot. So the perfect setting for peyote would be a sweat lodge. And that would allow the medicine really to work. And it's in that sweat lodge that one was able to receive visions or go on spiritual journeys. And as I said, peyote ceremonies were fairly common because this was the little cacti that was growing in the area. So obviously the Native Americans used what they could get. And then we also had tobacco offerings and the tobacco ceremonies of the four corners and of the four directions and of the five elements. And these ceremonies are still taking place today and are going to take off even further into the future. And then the sun dance. Who can forget the Native Indian sun dance? More importantly, the sun initiation. This sun initiation was an initiation that took place all over the world. The Aztec, Inca and Maya were adepts at the sun initiation and the heart initiations. And these plants would allow them the sun initiation, where they would allow that sun of the sun god to penetrate their consciousness, their aura and their entire matrix. Once the ceremony was over, the Native Indians continued sitting on this rock in the afternoon sun to feel that power of the other world that they had just been in contact with. The Native Americans used many plants, and we think of the Osha root, or known as the bear root. This was to ward off evil and to protect one in one's journeys. And then we come to ayahuasca. How did the Native Americans get ayahuasca if they were in the Great Plains when ayahuasca comes from the Amazon? Well, quite simple. They had the Sonoran desert toad, also known as the Colorado desert toad. So this toad, when it's threatened, it secretes a poison, and this poison contains ayahuasca, except it's not a normal ayahuasca. It's probably 1,000 times stronger than ayahuasca. So imagine that. How did the ancient Native Americans know that this frog had the serum that could take them into the other world? And also a word of caution, this shouldn't be experimented with. It should only be used through a proper facilitator or shaman. And let's also not forget the vision quest and the rite of passage. So particularly the vision quest, where one would go on one's own up into the mountains or in the ravines, or finding a quiet sacred place, consuming plant medicines and meditating and finding oneself, going deep within. And that's really what the plant medicine does. It takes one within, just as meditation does. So sitting in this quiet place, connecting to one's spirit guardians and the higher beings, one was able to receive guidance not only in visions but intuitively. And this is what Native Americans did often. They weren't shy to use their plant medicines, for they knew the truth. And yes, many people ask, what about mushrooms? Of course they used mushrooms. So we must remember, wherever tribes were around the ancient world, whatever plant medicine you could get from your environment, that's the medicine you used. So they were able to use mushrooms. And remember, the Red Road led all the way to Mexico. Everything was connected. And so there was a route from Mexico all the way into the heart of America, where they would trade plant medicines. The shamans and plants played a pivotal role in the Native American ceremonies that aimed to transcend the physical world and access the spiritual realms. These plants were considered sacred gifts from nature, each plant carrying its own specific magnetism, making them essential to the Native American spirituality and religious practices. So we see that the Native American shaman is going to have his work cut out for him, for it will be his job to break all the tribe members through the matrix into a higher state of consciousness. And this is going to happen. It's already taking place where they're consuming peyote legally. Only when Native Americans reconnect with the sacred power of plant medicines will their ancient cultures and spiritual traditions truly be reborn. Join me on this journey of what was once lost. We are going to rediscover this, and we'll also be taking a look at the Red Road, less traveled to Mexico, and shapeshifting. How the shaman and other tribes members were able to shapeshift. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So welcome to the Red Path Portal. I'm Trevor, and I'd like to welcome Rob Sleeve.
Hi.
Thanks for joining or agreeing to join me on my show.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
So the reason why I brought you on the show is because I think we agree with a lot of things, that we're on the same page. And you've worked with the plants, you still work with the plants, and so just tell the viewers a little bit about yourself.
Well, my journey or my introduction to plants started a while ago, but in earnest maybe 15, 16 years ago, where I had an ayahuasca experience. So for 10 to 12 years before that, Trev, I was partaking in no plants, no tobacco, no alcohol.
Yeah, I remember.
It was Eastern philosophy, quite a pious path, a lot of meditation. So I found the similarities with this old couple and drank ayahuasca. And that kind of shifted everything. Once you've been through the veil or into the cosmos or the universe or trip, it gets a bit challenging with the choice of words because people get stuck up or get caught onto words and then lose the gist of the explanation or the understanding. So ayahuasca is a very personal journey, and I also believe in sharing the experience. You give part of the experience away, because spirit or the cosmos or the universe or the spirit of the plant is transmuting to you directly. So it's a private message that will benefit your life, that will help you to like basically get out of the head. It's technically what ayahuasca is doing, and opening up the heart. So
because that's the problem with everyone, we're all stuck in our thoughts in our head. And then even if you meditate, you can't meditate because you're stuck in the thought process. It's only when you let go and observe.
Exactly, and like a question that came to me is, are my thoughts even mine? Where do my thoughts come from? Because if life is a program, and we've been programmed, and we can look at many aspects of life where we can see the reality of the program played out. So we know it's there, and they always say a conspiracy is a conspiracy until it's not a conspiracy.
Exactly.
So the reality is that we don't know what reality is. Science is catching up. I believe there were people in our history that left us hints that did go past the expansiveness of what we perceive ourselves to be. I believe the life we live is very limiting, because the system we as humanity have accepted as normal, that we've created and live in, sets those parameters, and maybe to do with law and order, respect, structure. But I think the further we've stepped away from an understanding of who we were, I think the more challenging life has become, So we're making technological advancements, and we expanding as humanity, but at what cost?
Exactly.
So the plants completely give you the opportunity to shift your consciousness, or shift your everything, your belief system, your understanding of the universe, understanding of yourself. And I was blessed to find the organization, church in inverted commas, eclectic Christian religion that's registered in South America, that was only founded in the early 1900s by an African man who was from slave descent in Brazil, and he had crossed paths in the jungle and met a Kashina shaman, and with a language barrier that found a way, and they drank ayahuasca together. And because the maestro had a Roman Catholic influence in his upbringing, when he crossed over to the spirit world, or through the veil or the matrix, or whatever understanding is heaven, the cosmos, the universe, his first interactions were with spirit beings that were of the Roman Catholic faith, within the celestial concordance.
Yeah, maybe also to pull him into the matrix before he really sees the truth of what the matrix is.
It was a soft landing, because he felt comfortable. He knew all these deities, he recognized them from his faith. And then he saw the connection. And then he maybe saw through the veil and understanding. And he worked with a family unit within the forest for I don't know how many years, and the word got out, and that religion has grown, and it's registered as a religion within the law of Brazil, to protect us when we drink the Holy Sacrament in the church.
So what's their name?
It's the Sainted Army. Sainted Army translated into English would be Give Me. And then also we must just remember that this is my interpretation and understanding of what I've experienced for my personal journey. And within the church, it's quite a large organization. They've just built a new church in the Amazon jungle.
But now, let me just interrupt you there. So do you think all these ancient ways need to be Christianized, or can they not go back to their traditional ways like the Native Indians or the Native Americans?
Yes, but with these new religions, what they do is they give an opportunity for the celestial concordance, heaven, the creator, our ancestors, to now channel the new way, the new path, the new direction, and that's what's happened within the Sainted Army. From my opinion, as being a Western member and not really understanding the language, it's a path of the heart, and all our teachers do is guide us and show us the way. When we've reached that point that we believe we've needed to reach, then their help and assistance is no longer there, because all they're doing is they're teaching us a language that we don't yet understand. That's exactly on the other side of the veil. Once we understand the language, they've served their purpose. That's why there's old sayings that go that when the student's ready, the master will appear. It doesn't mean that you get attached to your master and now you're stuck with that master, because the masters teach us that it's about shifting. It's so whether the Christian Bible is a story or not, but the story of Christ going into the desert for 40 days and his pilgrimage for an understanding to raise his consciousness, because he was born human.
Yeah, because there's a lot of debate about that he was initiated in Egypt and in India. But now, going away from that, yes. What about, you were telling me about the Red Road, the Red Path. So the Native Americans used to have their philosophy around the Red Road, which is really the Red Path. And now you're telling me there is this new organization.
Well, it's like, once again, my understanding of the complete alliance is just like limited from my little window into it. Our chief was born Mexican. There's tales and fables of him arriving in this world, which he's done, and his reality on the world would be to connect the condor and the eagle, so the northern and the southern traditions onto one sacred altar.
Like they were connected in ancient times.
Correct. The tribes were always like moving, they were following the seasons.
The narrative has always said that they weren't, and that they were isolated and they didn't have these connections. And
they could not survive unless they were nomadic. If you go to any First Nation, Aboriginal nation, Indigenous nation, in the beginning of their times they were all nomadic because they understood that they needed to follow the season for the source of food. And we hadn't even invented like agriculture. We all think of vegetables and fruit, but we don't understand that those have all been manipulated by us. Almost none of the fruits and vegetables we eat today are in their original state that we found them as human beings. You know, we wanted to make apples sweeter, so we bred them. If we look at dogs, all dogs come from wolves, and like our abilities, what we are like able to achieve. I mean, like teachers I worked with use words like we are magnanimous, that the plant actually may have a consciousness, that it's connected to a spirit being that's obviously within that side of the world, and through that your development goes, and why you're less able to be controlled is because this expansiveness starts to happen. Your eyesight goes from being in blinkers from what you've been taught, and if you look at most of Western society, it's parrot fashion. There's no creativity.
Exactly.
So when they are consumed, people who are ready and willing for them, and who are open with no expectations, in the majority of the times find major relief and advancement in their life. And like resolution and resolvement of karma. Who sat in a teepee in a circle and prayed on the chanupa, on the tobacco. When you have the tobacco and the chanupa, you have the power to speak your truth. And the people or in your circle have the power to understand and listen to your truth. And that's word, that's a contract. That was their way. It was done. And when they saw the white man smoke the pipe but go against his word, and the white man asked them for the tobacco, they gave them the tobacco because they saw their foolhardiness towards the tobacco without understanding it as a sacrament.
Because then it was more about making money and mass producing it.
And then we can see what tobacco does. It kills just about 6 million people a year, or tobacco-related conditions. So if we use tobacco in a different way, then it's a medicine. It's just about the application of it. But because they close those doors and they don't allow the information out, people don't really understand. And then if you take it to a spiritual context, in traditions, people who smoke, who meet people, facilitators, mediums who have got a connection to the other world, a lot of times they will say, hey, you have an ancestor, or you have a guard or a helper who's trying to communicate with you, and you're not catching the message because you don't understand the language. And so you want to smoke because they're trying to get your vibration up through the talking tool. If tobacco was used in the right, when you're craving tobacco, we're smoking because that's how we do it in the Western world. If we were in a native tradition, they would use the tobacco in a completely different way to connect to that side. So there's many understandings and uses of tobacco, but they all lead to a spiritual connection. So misuse, anything in abuse and use is going to be detrimental to us.
This whole thing with peyote now they're allowing the Native Americans to use peyote. They've always used it for thousands of years amongst a whole lot of other things. So there is this they're starting to use them in the church. Okay, so before we lose the plot here and take a break, I really thank you for joining us. And we're going to film another one in a moment.
Yes.
Let's talk about a little bit about peyote.
So it's an interesting plant. It's found mostly in Mexico, but it's bred all around the world. It can be and is a Schedule 1 drug in most countries, or very legal because of its content of mescaline. And because the pharmaceutical industry or the law don't understand how the plant works, they only demonize one alkaloid in the plant. But when indigenous people work with plant medicines, they work with the plant in a wholeness, or as complete as possible.
And the consciousness, spirit.
That's why they keep it whole. So with peyote, if you could imagine this, Trevor, this is my experience of peyote. Peyote takes 5 to 7 years to mature before the mescaline is active in the plant. So there's many years, they're very slow growing.
One of the slowest growing plants in the world.
Succulents in the world, yes. So it's a plant of patience. In the Murakami, the way they harvest it, skin it, and then process the actual peyote, they have a way of representing the masculine and the feminine within the peyote, but the peyote as a whole is represented as a feminine energy.
Yeah, because I would think the alkaloid mescaline would be the masculine.
The balance, yes, correct.
And but then all those other
alkaloids that fall there. And
so in that case, is would you say peyote is more balanced than the Peruvian torch or the?
It's a different.
Pachinoy.
No, it's just it's just more feminine. It's more gentle. It's used if in ceremony, or when in ceremony. It's used at night in the dark hours with the moon, Lua, mother. And where San Pedro traditionally would be used as a daytime experience, energetic focus. With the peyote, when you consume the peyote in ceremony, it's a much gentler experience. I don't want to call it a trip because it's not trip. It feels like you've been hugged and held by your granny, it's warm and comforting. It's very simple to get caught introspectively. It feels like you're falling in on yourself in moments and going down like the rabbit hole, but internally, and understanding it is, once again, it's very personalized, because the plant or the alkaloids in the plant, the situation, your circumstances, your emotional state, your intention, your expectations, all those things will affect your journey with it. and so we work within the lineage because the plant is used within a few of the ceremonies, because it's on the altar. It's a very beautiful connected experience. You journey for a couple of hours, depending on the dose. When I've been blessed to do one or two, maybe one like Murakami, like a ceremony when a couple have traveled to South Africa, and I don't remember their names. And we had quite a few like doses of male and or masculine, and then the feminine like peyote in separate jars. Very interesting people singing like ancient songs of Icaros that help open the pathways, the sound vibration, the tune that they sing in it, the words that they sing in, the connection. It was more than likely channeled the song while on peyote to expand the experience. It was, extremely beautiful. It's an all-night ceremony. You start sometime in the evening and you end basically when the sun starts coming up in the morning. And people have life-transforming experiences, like complete life-transforming experiences, where they get shown another reality, another side to life, a world that's not like limited by the mind or by the conditioning or the programming or the so-called understanding that we have of the world. I always say it, like people shift their lives. They want to understand more of who they are. They start to understand it's an introspective journey because the plants take you to introspective spaces. The people say, oh, but what about a bad trip? Well, it's in your head, it's your trip. It's not my trip. It's bad for you, but that's your interpretation of what's happening in your head because of your visions or what's that. So for you to even try and explain that to other people, you shouldn't be, it's taking you to your bad trip or your...
Because a lot of people think the illusion of they always got to see something, but like you're saying, it feels like you're being hugged, and there's all that feeling and that emotion and other kind of power that flows through you, cosmic power, which triggers things within you. So it's not always necessarily about the visuals. So seeing is believing, and light is everything, but there is that feminine side that you speak about. That nurturing side.
That introspective side where your eyes are closed and then you can't but be within the inside world. Because Trevor, where do we go when we sleep? So our physical body's in the bed sleeping, but where do we go? If we are consciousness and we're energetic and we're a stream of life that is like manifested in the physicality, to have this experience physically, because we're able to attach like physically when we're in the cosmic realms or the other worlds or through the veil, we in spirit form. It's very difficult for us to cultivate or take on the lessons or the understanding because we're in spirit. So being in the physical form, we come back, and so like this is also shedding, lifting veils, helping us to go back to hooks or traumas or like troublesome times in our lives. It's very difficult. It's very different for everybody. Like nobody has the same experience. So from my understanding is some people will drink ayahuasca once, some people will take peyote once, and that will be sufficient. They'll find the guidance and the need that they want. But there are other people who want to go into deeper introspection, who will commit to a teacher, shaman, curandero, an organization, a church, an affiliation, an alliance, where they have access to the plant medicine. And that's normally done indigenously within ceremony, where fire, the grandfather, is present. So we have a teacher present if we have an understanding. They'll work with tobacco in one or two ways.
Yeah, so talk to me about that, because that's really important. It's not using these things as a recreation drug, but that essence of ceremony and opening those portals to the higher, to the grandfathers, the grandmothers, the higher beings. So, but when you look at these plants, in a way, they can still be abused in either way.
Well, like anything can be abused. So, like, why do we work with a plant in the indigenous system and with the etiquette? So what are etiquettes? Like etiquettes are rules, they're understandings, there's protocols, there's principles. And why do we do them this way? So the understanding and the belief is that it's been done like this for thousands of years through our ancestors. The etiquette in the ceremony keeps us humble because it's about service. It's about you coming into ceremony
and you're realizing you're also in a sacred space.
Well,
and there needs to be
create that
respect.
sacred space, you know? Because everything is done in a certain alignment, so that when our energy comes in and out of these sacred spaces, when we protect these sacred spaces, when we use the medicine, everything is medicine. So even the way we build the fire for the first ceremony, which is a sweat lodge, there's a way to build a fire. There's so many pieces of wood that are used with the fire. If the firekeeper has children, the wood is cut to, I think, his oldest son, until his son gets to a certain age where the wood would be too long. But there's ceremony to everything. There was a connection that they had. If you climbed the mountain in the Vision Quest as an Indian, a Lakota, thousands of years ago, you would have used animal skin and tobacco and said a prayer 365 days a year. And as you said that prayer, you can't use a knot, because that knot, it crosses, it closes off the energy. You use a loop and a slip to tie the prayer onto a string, and that string would put you into your circle, and you would climb your mountain, and you would go seek your vision with your humble belongings, a bear skin or like an antelope skin, no food, no water, no vocalization, no whistling, no tapping, no outside distractions. It's about on the mountain and seek your vision. So those were used as parts of initiation and commitment, because you were committing to 4 years. And then if you go back and you look at it, we climb for 33 days, and then numbers come into it. And then if you look at the connection with the sacred fire to the deities and the prophets who have walked on the planet, then we realize that Christ walked the planet for 33 years. So we climb the mountain for 33 days over 4 cycles, the 4 directions, east, north, west, south, the 4 elements. So everything is back to nature, because without nature, our home planet, we don't have life. So like the honoring of the moon, the sun and the stars, because without the moon, the sun and the stars, there's no cycles. Without the cycles, there's no like animal or plant life on the planet. So that's acknowledged. And there's ceremonies that are done in our lineage for the sun dance, the star dance, the I think there's a moon dance,
ghost dance.
In certain lineages,
yes.
Yes, in certain lineages, yes. Sweat lodge becomes part of it, like medicine sweat lodge, 4 tobaccos, the Vision Quest. And all of these.
So maybe I should have you back, and you should speak about some of these things individually, because I think the viewers would be interested in your insight into some of these things.
My information is very, very limited on all of these things. It's like we ask ourselves the question, where's memory? And scientists can't really calibrate where a memory sits within our brain. So what is memory? Is maybe that's why the system teaches us in like parrot fashion. So if the brain is a receiver, then memory basically is just the more connections we can make, the more information we can receive, or because that's technically like what it is. It's a frequency, light, sound.
So it's all vibration, really, and that's
correct.
Coming back to the plants. So those plants have a magnetism, and that magnetism creates a vibration. So it uplifts your frequency, the same as what meditation and that would do. So if you meditated daily, you would shift those emotional, mental things that you're dealing with. So when you're in a ceremony, you would be more focused. Correct. And that is why some people, when they do that first ceremony, they're freaking out, because they're now having to actually deal with themselves, or for the first time sometimes.
Or they haven't been doing the meditation, and they don't really know what they are. They've just been told that they're this human being.
They can't let go of their thoughts.
Well, they can't get out of their heads.
That's the biggest thing.
So yes, so they can't get out of their thoughts, they can't get out of the mind, they can't get out of their head. So what the plants do is that they get your head out of the way for you.
Especially in ayahuasca, I would say.
Any of the plants, So what, Trevor, I do a 30-day San Pedro challenge, and there's many people microdosing technically. And what we do is that we introduce people to plants holistically. We like to go into nature, we like to go to walk, so we use San Pedro because it's the character of the plant, the energy it brings, the vitality, the focus. And so we give people doses of San Pedro. They set an intention. We ask them to come with an open heart and an open mind and no expectations. And then we go walk in the mountains. We reconnect to nature, and it's about guidance. There's no modality. There's no structure. It's about an open heart, because that's what the medicine is going to do to you in any case. We like to take a picture before the group, and we like to take a picture afterwards, because people can't understand the change in their physical appearance from just a couple of hours in the mountain and 1 or 2 doses of the plant. And what the plant does is, the spirit of the plant maybe, or the plant is, when you're introspective, you start to question some of your values or some of your decisions or your habits or whatever your intention was or whatever your situation is in your current life. And you start to wonder, like, why am I questioning what I'm doing? Because I know it's wrong, but I've always had a story for it, and now my story's not working. Now I'm going to have to take responsibility, a very big word in the Western world, and not do this thing anymore, whatever it is for you. So the plants get you to that point where you stop buying into your false story. You stop buying into the illusion that you're creating that's keeping you stuck or limiting your expansion or your beliefs or your understanding of the world.
So on that point, look how many people that have done ceremonies, stopped smoking, stopped coffee, stopped alcohol. Almost like it was a habit. We're cooking dinner, let's open a bottle of red wine. I only have 2 glasses. And so that becomes like your 10, 15 year thing, and they did a ceremony and they get shown something, and that's the last of the alcohol.
They'll never touch alcohol again. They're using plants in rehabilitation of drug addicts with a huge amount of success.
So that makes me think, because this is the whole thing. Are the plants addictive?
No, there's not one of the plants. We call them plant medicines. People get offensive because it's not been...
I mean, ayahuasca could never be addictive.
No, Trevor.
It's just something you don't want.
I think I drank my first time in, I can't remember, 2010 maybe, 2009, I don't know, somewhere there.
It was about then.
So I drank ayahuasca for the first time. In these years that I've been drinking, at one stage ayahuasca took my visions away for 2 years, or not took my visions away, it looked like it's interpretation. I wasn't having visions. I was going to ceremony, going through the motions of the ceremony, setting intention, being open-minded, open-hearted, participating, present, and it gets frustrating because, and then I started to understand that the visions can be distracting. That once you get to a point of this cultivation and this navigation of this incredible world that we live in, and more incredible, like my friends would say, when you do an introspective journey, is that the possibilities of who we are open up. It comes back to the control again. A lot of people who are analytical or left-brained are scared of the plants because they don't want to lose control. And the thing is and then your ceremony can be really tough for you.
Because you get people that overthink that just can't stop, eh?
Correct, and that's not a very good thing when you're working with a plant medicine.
Now that's the thing with ayahuasca. She's got a way to take you into visions, but also to break you through the matrix and pull you out of your brain, even if it throws it into the bucket, and reboot you.
Yes, well, like one of the first things that ayahuasca will do will be clean your body.
Yeah.
So that's part of the purging process. But
physically, emotionally, and mentally.
Correct. But a lot of people just see it as, I don't want to do it because I don't want to get sick.
Yeah, they all say that.
We need to look past that, because you're not only getting physically sick, what's also happening is in the purge, you'll find people will dry purge. You'll find people will empty their stomach of everything that's within the stomach, and they will still have the urge to purge, and when they purge, they will be purging air, dry early.
Because there's not really much in their stomach to start with.
Correct. Most of us are done with that gets out. People
and you fasted for a day or 2 before you've done the ceremony.
Yes, if you like follow the instructions with with a path that's from the indigenous side, yes, you would have cut out salt, meat, alcohol, all the Western stuff.
That's why it was so easy for the Native Americans and Mesoamericans to ceremony, because they didn't have processed foods, and
they were ready in a week.
Their bloodstream was already pure.
Yes,
and so there was half the job was done, and they had that belief. So most of the job was done. Just something to lift that perception to open that door.
Well, exactly, Trevor. So the thing is, we have like DMT in our body all the time, but we have an alkaloid in our tummy that inhibits it. So the reason why we can absorb the DMT when we take it in the formats from the forest is because they have an IMO inhibitor within it. So they've taken two plants who have got two completely different like modalities. They affect our bodies within different ways. But an excessiveness of DMT is absorbed within our body, but not absorbed like we want it absorbed. It just gets flushed into our body. So the plants are very clever, and like talking about addiction, nobody gets addicted to like ayahuasca.
I would say it's an impossibility. The more you do it, the more difficult it becomes.
Yes,
in a way.
Yes, because the more you know, the less you know, and the more you go, because eventually you're understanding. If you're receptive,
because the more you can do it, face it, you've let go of all those things, you now understand, and now once you let go, you can really go.
Well, correct, but it's also improving our physicality because it has the ability to rewire like our neural pathways, physically rewire.
And develop new brain cells.
Correct, which new regions of the brain or expanding regions of the brain.
Absolutely.
So like science and biology will take time to catch up what the ancients knew, you know, and then we go back to the original point. And so we have friends and family kind of everywhere, you know, there's a sacred circle or a fire somewhere. It's all connected to the fire or connected to the sacredness. If you want your tradition and your etiquette preserved, you bring it to the sacred altar. It gets acknowledged on the altar, and that's how it gets preserved, because now those stories don't die. That etiquette lives on forever.
Absolutely.
Confirmation from spirit. That's the important part of it, is the authentic connection. I think that happens quite often, Trevor, because when you go to do work with your page, it's a connection to spirit. So it's an initiation, and your page will then understand the connection with spirit that you have, and he will help you translate it. So not everybody is born to pour ayahuasca. Yeah. You'll find that somebody will, and I don't know the technical term for them, but he would work with the Cambo frog, and he would then specialize in the Cambo as a doctor. So he would be coming to the ayahuasca ceremonies, and he would be attending with the 2 or 3 people who are initiating with the page in the forest, but his focus is on the frog. So I know for once or twice, I know that they've pushed people to like 127 points where they do the meridians up and down the legs.
Because what's the normal starting with 3 or 4?
No. I think Bunny gave me 11 or 13 points the first time I did frog with him, but he could see that I was a bit of a hard nut to crack, and they had a lot of stuff to get through. And so if you go look at the medical side of frog, it's a neurovenom or toxin. The ketones that are present within the phytoketones and the neuroketones, and I may have these terminologies correct, which you'll see with me. I don't really care about the names, and I understand how it works because I've experienced it, because I've had numerous like applications in my time. We try to do 2 applications a year because in the forest they don't have antibiotics, vaccinations.
Yeah.
This is one of those medicines that boosts their immune system naturally. So basically you have a neurovenom that gets released. So with 120 something or 200 points, whatever the points were, you could go into a coma and your heart rate could drop to the point that an inexperienced person without a stethoscope could think you were dead. Look, I mean, it could be an admixture. It could have been added.
So they could have taken. So that's what you were saying. This venom. This is the Amazonian frog, not the Sonoran.
No.
Desert toad.
That's bufo. That's something completely different.
So the Navajo and other tribes and could have taken that, traded that, because it is DMT, and used small doses mixed with other things and smoked as a 1 or 2 shot.
Yes.
But the shaman would have known the formula.
Yes, well, he would have been directed to the frog, or his ancestors would have known where to harvest the frog.
Yeah, because that frog would have got hundreds of tribes through the matrix, one frog. Literally.
Like correct. You know, there's some tribes in the Amazon jungle where they use a seed called like chalipongu.
Chaliponga.
Yes, so the seed gets roasted. I don't know the whole process. I've just seen people receive it, and I know first-hand experiences from a few friends that I know. It's quite a long applicator pipe where they blow it, and my friend said when the first blast hit him, he was already almost collapsing. They had to help him and then hold him and then let him go for him to hold the pipe to receive the second one. And where he collapsed on his side, he was there for 45 minutes to an hour, and he said it was one of the deepest, furthest DMT experiences that he ever had experienced in his life. He stayed in the fetal position the whole time.
So you've had Chalipanga in an ayahuasca ceremony?
No.
You haven't tried it?
No. I'm a bit of a traditionalist, and because we met the people we met, we technically have access to these medicines, and because of my understanding of the connection and the spirit and the work that gets done with it, the sacredness with it, the intentions, the songs. When we make daimi, or the ayahuasca rebaptized daimi, the women harvest the leaves, the men carry the basket into the forest, like the lady checks the branch that the leaves aren't damaged. It gets clipped, she puts it into the man's basket, he carries it to a separate venue where the ladies inspect every leaf and then clean it by hand. The men go into the forest and find the vine that they've identified through the padrino. The whole vine gets harvested. The canopy, they follow every single shoot out into the forest, every single root gets dug up. Like, it's the work and it's only men that do that, and the ladies harvest and the leaf.
And who cooks? The women and the men?
Traditionally the men, because it's hard work.
Okay.
The woman will come support on a balcony, kind of set up within the kitchen, factory, whatever you want to call it. The men in the old days used to use a bastão, a baton, on a wooden block, and they would beat the ayahuasca while singing the songs in complete harmony. It's just not doof, doof, doof. Everybody is in the complete beat. Then the padrino of the house, of the kitchen, he would have a formula. There's guys chopping wood to make fire. They cooking, depends on how big the church and the facilities and how many heaters they need. They have 2, 4, 6, 8 pots. There's different combinations. There's singing, there's shifts. It's called a futu, and it happens, I hope I got the pronunciation right, but it's the festival for 2 weeks a year, and it happens twice a year. And in the forest it's pretty similar as well. Then the whole community gets together and they harvest it and they cook their sacrament, and then all the sacrament is taken up, and within their church they have a cellar, a sacred cellar where the daimi lives, and from there it's poured twice a month. So, and with the Kashinawa the same way, they'll go into the forest, harvest the plant, come back, and they have their formula. The page in the village, or the chief in the village, his sons, elders, cousins, they know the formula. There's a way that they put it together, how they manage the pots.
So you say every 2 weeks, so it's like the Roman Catholic Church Holy Communion every 2 weeks.
You stay on the cycle of the moon, new and full moon basically. So you stay within the repetitiveness of it. And it's not in the repetitiveness of it, is that in many of the sacred traditions around the world, they believe that you want to reconnect to whatever your higher power is every 14 days. You don't want to extend that connection in 14 days because it keeps the thread bright, it keeps the connection strong.
Yeah.
So they know nothing about Christianity and all of those things, especially with the Kashinawa, but they have a god, Mushimu, within the Kashinawa tradition, but there are many deities, Iemanjá is a queen of the ocean and the waters.
Like all the ancient tribes had all their deities.
And they all had their specific works, And then when you look at these deities that are now made in little statues, then you see the similarities in South Africa with some of the Sangoma traditions, with the initiation uniforms are the same. And
also some of the Native American, also some of the...
Exactly. And not just South African, but also other African traditions who follow very similar patterns. So then we go like, but how did that happen? And we say that slavery that went into Brazil. A lot of the African people managed to take seed, drums, culture with them, and their culture is what kept them going and motivated. So their culture still thrives in Brazil, and it's a very mixed and multiracial country. And a lot of the tribes for instance, next to like Bunny's tribe on the northwestern frontier, I think it is, in the forest there, all the way up, I think, to Ecuador and the top of Bolivia, there's an untouched tribe who don't want to be encountered by anybody. They're very aggressive if anybody comes to them.
Yeah, I think I've seen that.
They don't...
Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Trevor, if you haven't joined me before. So, on Unraveling Native American Mysteries, as I promised, today we are going to unravel some ancient rock art and come to understanding and meaning. And also, how did I come to this? There are two ways that I discovered how to interpret the rock art. And also, why was this rock art created and who created it? Some of the rock art has been picked or chipped, and that is called a petroglyph. And a pictograph is that's painted on the rock. And when it comes to spiritual truth or the occult, we must realize we live in a world that's opposite of what once was. So when we look at this, some of it may seem a bit strange. And to interpret this, not to offend anyone, is to get a true understanding of what was. And why I started this YouTube channel was to reveal the ancient Mayan mysteries as was revealed to me. So I'm still coming to that in the future. And also to my subscribers in India, Hindustan, I haven't forgotten about you, I'm still coming to India. How did India save the world, both morally and spiritually? So don't miss out on that episode. When I went through my awakening and remembering, and all that knowledge of Mayanism filtered through into my consciousness. And studying Mayanism and the Mayan belief and religious system, I was allowed to see the similarities that existed all over and coming to an understanding of this. So this is one way to do it when you connect the Aztec, the Inca and the Maya. And then you will see the similarities that exist through North America. Because as I said before, everything was connected in ancient times, unlike early historians would tell us. And that was a narrative that they specifically created. By using these images, how I came to this, and then also being initiated in the Matrix by the ancients. And in this case, in particular, by the Plumed Serpent. When we start to look at ancient religions and go back thousands of years, their religions were central to their lives. So what came first in ancient cultures was spirituality and religion. So in ancient times, there was a time that we call the glory days. The glory days of the gods, kings and men, in particular with the Maya. So what is this all about? So there was a time in our history where extraterrestrials, aliens as you call them, these higher beings came to our planet and actually landed, because they don't normally land. So they landed all over the world, and including in all the Americas. And this is when we start to see the truth of what once was. And if you look at the Americas, in particular North America, so what happened to the North Americans? Well, a lot of their rock art has also disappeared. So if you look at the picture behind me, we can see the canyon lands. But what are we actually seeing? We're seeing water. So they flooded these canyon lands, these reserves, these ravines with water to make lakes, Lake Powell and all these other, Glen Canyon. And this is what you can see behind me. And this is where Native Americans actually lived. So when we look at the rock art, you can always see hands that are painted on the walls. So what they did was they placed paint on their hands, and those people, that tribe, those Native Americans living in those areas, they were the ones that placed their handprints on the rocks. So this was to let people know we were here. This was us that were here. That is their signature. They are leaving their mark for future generations. And this can actually be seen all over the world. And this is also found all over the states. From Utah, Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, right up to the Mississippi, and really all over the ancient world, including the Maya and Aztec. And we see this cross, what looks like a cross. So this is the four directions. And when we take a closer look at it, we can understand that this is Venus, the planet Venus. So before the dawning of the light, before the awakening of mankind, there comes the early light, as it's always been. And in this case, it's the sovereign plumed serpent. Our sovereign plumed serpent is symbolical of the brightest star in the sky, and that is Venus. And Venus in some way is also symbolical of the ancient beings, the Naga, those ancient serpent-like beings that come from another solar system, coming to humanity to give us wisdom and knowledge. And also, what did the great master himself say in the scriptures? Be wise as serpents, yet gentle as doves. And obviously Christ understood who the Naga were. And we see the Naga in Hinduism, Buddhism, we see it in all the way through Mexico. And if you take a look at the pyramid here, at the base of the step pyramid, we see the heads of the plumed serpent. You can see he's got curly horns on his head. And all the images through Mesoamerica, from the Aztec to the Inca, you can see this plastered on all their step pyramids, in all their temples, in nearly every single thing. Because at one time, the plumed serpent walked amongst the Mesoamericans. So in this image here, you can see the plumed serpent with his horns, as in Mayanism. But when you see the sovereign plumed serpent in real time, his horns are not curled. This is what they look like. So here we see this all over the Americas. And take a look at these serpents of rock art from Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, all the way up to the Mississippi. There you see a horned serpent. Why would all these cultures make this image of a horned serpent? And recent discoveries in in the Amazon have also found a horned serpent. So from, I think it's Colombia, here we can see a panel behind me, and they have the horned serpent too. So how is it that this horned serpent starts to appear everywhere? Because they knew the truth. How would anyone forget one of the most important happenings of the world when the gods actually descended, as the legends actually say amongst the Maya and the Mesoamericans? In ancient times, the most important things, those deities, were immortalized in their stuccos, in their art, in their carvings, in their temples. So the Native American Indians didn't have these temples. Well, in some sense they did, but they carved this on rock. And this rock art goes back thousands of years, some of it even going back before Atlantis. So you're looking at rock art that's beyond 12,000 years. So the Native Americans placed their most important memories, their most important events, what was central to their belief, on rock. And remember, the rock of ages. So the rock is going to be there forever. We will be gone and those rocks will still be there. We will reincarnate and the rocks will be there. Huge horns emanating from his head. The only thing I've got wrong is the ears. There is no ears. So delete the ears from the image and then you've got a fairly accurate image of what once was. So I was initiated quite some time back, and as I was initiated, there in front of me was the plumed serpent. And with other beings, they initiated me through these rings of initiation. And as I flew through the rings of initiation, so you must understand these rings are what they call the ring pass knot in the cult literature. So the ring pass knot is that barrier that your soul needs to break through to expand your consciousness. Otherwise it never grows beyond that. So it needs to be broken. So in an initiation, you pass through these rings and go through certain experiences. And in my particular initiation, I went through all the rings until I found myself beyond Earth's atmosphere. And I was initiated further. So what an incredible experience to be floating upward and seeing these rings in the atmosphere. And they were huge, they weren't just around me, they were massive. And so you can understand when the Native Americans were doing their sacred ceremonies, they were also initiated into these rings of initiation, this portal of light that takes you into the other worlds. And when you look at the other image of the plumed serpent on the Mayan calendar, we can see there's a head on either side. Well, that is how he functions in the world. If he's a dragon or a serpent, it doesn't mean to say the other side's a tail, although it can be a tail, it can still be a head. Because in the Matrix, in the world of immortals, this is how they work in the higher worlds of light. From a Western understanding, when they see this, they would be quite shocked because it looks like something else. But this is the horned plumed serpent. So we can see how important this was. This deity was central to not only Mayanism, not only to the Aztecs, but to the Native Americans. Thousands and thousands or hundreds of thousands of rocks and cliff faces had these images with the plumed serpent, and with him standing as a being with his horns up straight. And it must also be remembered, when we look at the rock art, a lot of it is similar. It wasn't just anyone that was allowed to do these carvings on the rocks. There were specific people whose job it was to create this. So in ancient times, the priests, the holy men, all those sacred people would come from Mexico all the way along the Red Road and spread through the Americas to not only bring plant medicine, but to trade other goods. And we also need to know, in those days, they never had horses or donkeys in the early days of the Americas. So everything had to be carried. So they had to limit what they could trade. So the most important things were traded, and those important things all related to their spirituality, to their religion. So from the feathers that were being used, to the cacao that was in sacred ceremonies, and to the different plant medicines. And as we know, a lot of the rock art has disappeared over the centuries. A lot of it has disappeared, but there is so much of it that so much of this knowledge still remains. This image here to my left, where we have an ancient being that is holding a serpent, similar to that you see in other ancient cultures around the world. We all know this, we've seen it. So how is it that they had the same stuff? Because the same thing was going on all over the world when the gods arrived. And take a look at this image. Well, this looks like E.T., doesn't it? So we know this is an extraterrestrial. This is a being that came out of a spacecraft. Call him E.T. What do you think he's doing with his hands? Well, he's obviously projecting energy. It's magnetic energy, electromagnetic energy, cosmic energy, that they are able to manipulate things behind the scenes with this energy. Everything is energy, so them being a lot more advanced, they have this knowledge of how to manipulate it. So the turtle here that we see is also fairly simple to interpret. Not only does it have the sacred connotation to ancient wisdom, this turtle here is symbolical of a clan, the turtle clan. So it's a certain tribe that bears the mark of the turtle. Just as all through the Americas you'll have a bear claw. This bear claw was a certain clan, and so it was. And we also need to remember, we see maize all over carved onto the rocks. Well, maize was central to them. That was the food they needed to grow and eat and store along the cliff faces for the winter months. So this is why they placed it on the rock in amongst the gods, because it was the gods blessing them with the rain and blessing them with a good harvest, so that they would make sure they had enough stock for the winter and early summer months. So again, these circles, they are not raindrops. It is not an image of Atlantis, although it can seem like it, and pretty accurate in terms of that. So looking at this rock art, we can now understand from two views, from studying and comparing the different cultures and seeing the similarities, and by entering the matrix and seeing the truth for ourselves. So here we have two ways to put this together. And I'd like to hear your comments on what you think. And now when you look at the rock art in the future, you can at least have a little bit of an understanding of what once was important to the Native Americans. And it wasn't just by chance that they did these things. I hope you enjoyed this video, and to see more like this, don't forget to subscribe.
Well, Jim, it all comes down to the fire, the connection with fire. So the kiva above the ground, below the ground, as above so below. In Mexico, if you do a temazcal, which is a sweat lodge, traditionally the sweat lodge would be below the ground because you're entering the earth womb of the mother. And then fire would be the sacred point, the grandfather, because the power of the sweat lodge.
Yeah, so you're bringing in those four elements, the four directions.
Yes.
So the entrance is the east, and then you've got there's a whole story depending on what tribe or what culture it is, where you would sit, what medicines would be taken, what gods would be called that particular
traditionally
night.
there would be no medicines within the sweat lodge. That would be called a medicine like sweat lodge, and it would be represented in a
Sorry, yeah, just on that point. So with San Pedro and Torch, ideally works in a warm environment, because if you're cold, it's not, So when you're warm, you get that, like you said, you're being hugged.
With San Pedro, that's one of the plants that they use within the Medicine Sweat Lodge, I think in the second round. Also in the second round, you're able to give what no longer serves you to the fire, the stones in the Sweat Lodge, and there's a spirit line that goes back to the center of the grandfather fire. So you're able to expel, get rid of, think out whatever your story and your process is. And in the third round, you can ask spirit for those things you need more of: love, compassion, patience, whatever your story is again.
Yeah.
So there's a point of transmutation. Plus you fight in the darkness, where you have no sense of belonging, being. There's no depth, there's no light.
Yeah.
So it takes you out of your reality, it takes you out of your norm, and it can make people very uncomfortable. And then on top of that, it's hot. It's really hot. It is incredibly hot.
But then the medicine works better.
The medicine of the Sweat Lodge, yes. So
Absolutely.
if we're talking of a straight Sweat Lodge, they call the Sweat Lodge the medicine. That's what the ceremony of the Sweat Lodge is the medicine. From the firekeeper arriving 2 hours before to start the fire for the stones to be hot enough for us to sweat.
Yeah.
From the person receiving the stones, he receives the stones in a certain format. The chief or the person pouring the lodge asks him for how many stones. The stones are worked out. We climb the mountain for the longest time in the traditional sense would be 13 days. So 13 times 4, I think, is 52. That's the maximum amount of stones you can have within like any fire for a Temescal or Sweat Lodge in our lineage. But everybody has their own story. There's like lineages called the Crazy Hair, where our stone pit is in the center of the lodge, and we have a 6-pointed star which gets created in the design of the Sweat Lodge. So even the design of the Sweat Lodge is sacred. Even when we plant the poles, we dig the hole, we do a prayer with tobacco into that hole before we plant the pole, to then bring the Sweat Lodge, the Sweat Lodge frame together. And it would be done like that traditionally, because they would cut the willow or the wattle or whatever was available, the 40 pieces, because it's about 40 pieces they need. They would build the structure and cover it with skins, collect the stones on the edge of the river, start the fire, and they would have a way of bringing the water into the lodge at that stage.
Yeah,
and the chief would be the one who would do, and they would be packed in, sitting with their knees up, and they would do, in our lineage and in some of the Lakota and a few other lineages, they do 4 songs per door, and there's 4 doors in the 4 directions, and there's 4 doors on the physical Sweat Lodge. So that's the initial start of the red path, and then you'll have a medicine Sweat Lodge, and then before you climb the mountain, you do a Sweat Lodge. Before you do the Sweat Lodge for purification, you would have done a 4 tobaccos, which is a 12-hour ceremony, 10-hour ceremony overnight, the night before you climb the mountain. So everything is connected. So by seeing the connectedness with the ceremonies and the lineage, we then understand that everything is interconnected.
Absolutely.
So it all comes back. They use these plants traditionally. If they were in parts of North America at the time where they never had the peyote, they would be using San Pedro or mushrooms.
Yeah, so it would have been up to the medicine man and who else was trained there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So people have been immigrating, caravanning, following the seasons. Traders with their furs would travel to sell them, because they're not going to sell their furs back to their tribe or trade them back to their tribe. They've collected them together. So they would go to the neighbors or whoever they knew they had to get hold of. And then they would take their medicines with, because they were trading. They were commodity.
Exactly, that's exactly what I saw.
Salt would be taken into the Amazon jungle, because there's no salt in the jungle, and the Indians in the jungle understood the importance of salt.
Absolutely.
So they used to trade. So these traders would come from outside of the jungle and trade salt for...
So it's so interesting that you say that, because I've got another 2 episodes coming up under that Unraveling Native American Mysteries. And that Red Road from Mexico and the whole connection of it, and how they use the plants, and then unraveling the glyphs, the rock art. So just coming to that point, so I think I've unraveled some of it, and basically, well, I'm not going to give it away now, but I'm going to put it in the episode. So, and I'm going to put this also in the episode. So you always see that spiral
Correct.
So now that spiral, you find it in Ireland, Scotland, England. It's really all over the world.
Everywhere.
So, and that's one of the most complicated things because it could be quite a few different things. But what is your feeling on it?
So the spiral, like the Fibonacci code, it forms part, not foundation, but part of our connection to the cosmos and how life is formed and everything's in a free flow. And we manipulate that free flow, but everything runs in that natural flow. If you look at our solar system, the way our planet goes, we have a natural flow.
So yeah, so we continue with this, and I hope you join us if we do a future episode. Well, we will be here.
I'm sure we're going to be. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm sure there's a lot you still want to ask me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was good, enjoyable, understandable, I hope, for people. It's just my opinion and my thoughts and my experience more so, you know.
Yeah, so I might as well do a whole playlist on this and fill it up. I think people will be interested. I'm interested.
We can come back and I'll share my limited understanding.
Thanks very much for...
It's a pleasure. Cheers.
Let's take a trip back in time, when North America was the place to be. Pristine rivers, endless forests, and yeah, millions of Native Americans living in harmony with nature. Life was good, right? But then in sailed the Europeans like that uninvited guest who shows up at a party, eats all the food, drinks all the beer, and starts handing out diseases like party favors. Yeah, things went downhill fast. You know those bring your own disease parties? Oh wait, those don't exist unless of course you're a colonialist from Europe. Cue the arrival of smallpox, measles, and a whole slew of illnesses. Who knew Europe was such a petri dish of doom? And boom, 90% of Native Americans gone, just like that. No, they didn't all die from a cold. These were some really gnarly diseases. Some of these diseases were gift-wrapped and delivered courtesy of infected blankets. That's what you call the worst secret Santa exchange of all time. Here they are handing out infected blankets, so this is after they've already decimated them with disease, which gave them the idea of how to exterminate the rest of them. So let us put smallpox on blankets, hand them out as gifts. As the guests became sick, they were told, go back to your people, your healers, your medicine men, so they can treat you. So on going back, obviously they infected the rest of the tribes and the nations. So you must also realize a lot of the light bearers, the medicine men, the shaman, those knowledge bearers, the storytellers, they all died, taking that wisdom with them. So you imagine if there's 100 in a tribe, only 10 remain. 1,000, you got 100. So you can see the devastation here, absolutely shocking. And if getting wiped out by disease wasn't enough, the US government thought, hey, why stop there? So they threw in some forced relocations for good measure. What could go wrong? Ah, yes, the trail of tears. And when you're already sick, starving, and dealing with smallpox, why not take 1,000-mile hike? The US government's plans move entire nations off their land, send them somewhere far away, and make sure their homes are erased from existence. And now here's the part where things go full Western. Imagine this. Government-sanctioned hunting, and not hunting game or buffalo, but hunting people, Native Americans. And the army went all out. It was burning homes, destroying villages, and leaving no trace that the indigenous people even existed. They thought, let's hit the delete button on history. It'll be like they were never here. But, spoiler alert, history remembers. And of course, with all the destruction and mass burials, they thought, a little game of hide all the evidence, if you will. You'd think they were trying to cover up the ultimate crime scene. Mass graves, check. Historical records erased, double check. Structures burned to the ground, absolutely. Here's the wild part. Despite everything, the diseases, the forced removals, the mass graves, Native Americans didn't disappear. Nope. they're still here, thriving. They are still here reclaiming their language, their lands, and their traditions. So while history tried to wipe them out, Native Americans were like, not today, mother fluffers, we are still here, and believe it or not, still fighting for our rights. And now they are the ones teaching us to live in harmony with nature once more. Talk about a twist plot. So next time you hear someone saying Native Americans disappeared, you can tell them no, they just evolved, still here, still thriving, and still reminding us how to live like we actually belong to this planet. So this was just a summary of historical facts, and you can check this in the description box below. And of course I've left out a lot of facts here. This was just a short summary of what once was. And there are even stories of forced cannibalism, where the Spanish conquistadors forced the Aztec and the North Native Americans to consume flesh. So each video really adds a piece of the puzzle to what once was. I hope you enjoyed this video. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Trevor if you haven't joined me before. Today we're taking a look at Native American gods, the gods of the ancient world. And also to see that there's a slight overlap between Mesoamerica and the Native Americans. So first we start with the Great Spirit, known as the Great Mystery. So the Great Spirit is known by the Nakota, the Dakota and Lakota tribe as Wakantanka. What is this Great Spirit? So the Great Spirit is what we would understand as the Father of all, the Creator, that Spirit that has its essence in everything, in all of life, in all of creation, not only this world, but in the matrix, in the light, behind all life. So this Great Spirit was worshipped by all the Native Americans in ancient times. And they all had their own theories and their own names of what the Great Spirit was called. But they all understood the essence of the Great Spirit, that it was the Spirit, this being, this God, that its essence and life force permeated all life in creation. Then we come to the ancient sun god, and we also have to realize that in the matrix there are many sun gods in the different realities, or in the different ages that we go through. So each age would have an incoming sun god or deity. To the people of peace, the Hopi, they called the sun god Tawa, and the Lakota, the Nakota and Dakota called him We. The sun god was very central in all ancient traditions around the ancient world. The Maya, the ancient Egyptians and the Greeks. The same ancient mystery teachings that were taught to the ancient world were also taught to the Native Americans long ago. And these sun rituals you can find all the way through the Amazon. So what would take place in some of these rituals of the sun god, one would take a certain plant medicine or go through a certain exercise, be placed in a certain position, and one would, through an initiation, allow the sun's rays, the sun god's energy to permeate one's being. In other words, fill one's aura up into one's consciousness, emotions, and one would feel that power of that sun being through your being. And this is really what they did, to pull that light into one's consciousness. And then I'd like to say the grandfather of all. And when we really talk about grandfathers and grandmothers, we're not talking about your grandfather or your grandfather's grandfather or grandmother. We're talking about beings that are so ancient, the ancient of days, that they are called grandfathers. So grandmother earth, grandfather sun. So ancient beings that when you meet them in the spirit world, you will feel as if you're a young child next to your grandfather. And this is how it is. And grandfather is known as the god Chac amongst the ancient Maya. He is in the Aztec culture, and you can see the same symbolisms carved on rocks throughout America of grandfather Chac. There is only one who wears a crown. It's a golden crown. There is only one who has swirling eyes. And look at the eyes carefully. You can see these swirls very much like we see in the ancient rock art, not only found throughout the Americas, but throughout the ancient world. And that also is a secret, part of an initiation. And when you look at grandfather, he has a beard, as it said in the scriptures. The ancient of days, he sits on a throne with a beard. And he wears the crown, so his aura expands beyond Earth's aura, and each soul on Earth needs to go through grandfather's consciousness or through his aura to be initiated at some point as one advances or evolves spiritually. Very much like these images here. But one thing we have to know is that he does have a protruding nose, as you can see in these other images. Very similar to Ganesha. And grandfather really sits at the top of the hierarchy of Earth souls. But each soul needs to be initiated by grandfather. And if you think of grandfather's initiations, he has a specific code. And you see these little square codes. And each code is a simulation. So you get pulled, your soul gets pulled into a simulation and you experience something. And that is what we call an initiation. Just as our souls come from the higher worlds and are placed in these bodies, and now we're stuck in this simulation. So if you're out of your body, he could initiate individual souls simultaneously, all at the same time, while spending individual attention with each soul, because his grandfather is the ancient of days. Grandfather is also known as the god of thunder, lightning and rain, so that he would bring rain. He wasn't the only deity that could bless people with rain, but through Mesoamerica he was one of the main deities, including the Plumed Serpent. Now we come to the Plumed Serpent. The Plumed Serpent and Chac are always found together, functioning in the spirit world. And with the Plumed Serpent, the sovereign Plumed Serpent, who came on a spacecraft long, long ago to bring ancient wisdom, not only to the Mesoamericans, but to the Native Americans. And they built these ancient mystery schools where the priests, or should I say the shaman, would go to be trained. And they would be trained in depth, and they would go back to the tribes to initiate and to create ceremonies. But they weren't just initiated, they were the real thing. They were clairvoyants. They could see the past, present and future. They knew how to heal. And the only reason they did this is they knew how to enter the matrix and create this connection between this world and the next. So together in the matrix, Grandfather Chac and Sovereign Plumed Serpent continue to teach the Atlanteans after the flood of Atlantis, which were many of the Native Americans and the Mesoamericans. We've got to understand that they are cosmic beings. They're beings that have reached a state of cosmic consciousness, or have always been in a state of cosmic consciousness. And they are the ones guiding humanity to evolve towards that state of consciousness, where all that we've known will just be the foundation of what's really coming. We know the Plumed Serpent has many names, the Feathered Serpent, Kukulkan. So the name was Uktema amongst the Cherokee, and the Lakota called the Horned Serpent Uktena. And here you can see some of the other names of the tribes of the Plumed Serpent. So we must also remember that the sovereign Plumed Serpent came as a teacher for humanity, as a protector, and as the gatekeeper to the other worlds. And then we have the Birdman, which is often seen carved on rocks all through the Americas, and also symbolical in the totem pole. So the Birdman here is a cosmic entity or being that is communicating with Native Americans in ancient times. And also the symbolism, if you think of Birdman, someone that has feathers, so those feathers are symbolical of the colors of the aura, and the outstretched feathers would be those colors within the aura, and that energy that is moving through the aura or through the feathers, or both. So again, when we look at the Native American headdresses, as you can see in these images, those are symbolical of the auric colors. So when a person awakens, the colors around the head, almost like a halo, and then the different vibrations and frequencies making up the different colors of the aura, as seen in the symbolism of Native American feathers. And it was the ancient shaman that would emulate the Birdman, dressing up with as many feathers as possible, entering the matrix where he would meet this ancient being and was able to communicate and bring back information for the tribes or for the people. So the Birdman shouldn't be confused with the Thunderbirds. So Thunderbirds are quite common through the ancient world, and what the Thunderbirds were spacecraft. So when the spacecraft were flying over the Native Americans, that craft used to thunder, and this is where the name came from, Thunderbirds. So the Thunderbirds were called Wakinyan with the Lakota tribes. And they knew, or the ancient shaman knew, how to invoke, how to do prayers and burn certain things and really call on or create that connection to open that portal or that frequency to these higher beings, which are extraterrestrials. And then we have the moon goddess Hanwe, according to the ancient Lakota. So the moon goddess was a feminine deity who used to emanate rays of energy called lunar prana into the earth, and there was this lunar prana and this kundalini prana that would awaken kundalini and the chakras. And it was the shaman that knew how to utilize these energies in the cycles of the moon. And also with some of the traditions of the Lakota, and this is just more proof that the ancient mystery schools existed in North America just as the rest of the world. Amongst the Lakota spirituality, the moon goddess and the sun god were married. So when there is a sacred initiation, or in other words, when Kundalini rises, or not even that, when the sun and moon within us, the pituitary and pineal gland, or the moon atom that is within our body, when they unite in the brain, there is a sacred marriage. And this is what the ancient Lakota in their spirituality knew so long ago. And it could only be that they were taught these ancient mysteries by the ancient gods. And remember, a lot of these teachings also came out of Mexico and that spread north into America. Everything was connected in ancient times. And then we come to Iktomi, the spider god. So when we look at this cosmic being, so in the Matrix, this being creates herself as a spider in any shape, form or size that she wishes. And the idea of this, she is a cosmic being. She is the weaver of destinies. She can connect people's destinies, past, present, and future. So she weaves the magic and connects things in the matrix behind the scenes. And that's why she's known as the spider goddess. She creates the webs that weave the dream catchers that allow us to remember the dreams. And she connects us to our visions and the inner world. And then we come to Unsi. I think I pronounced it correctly. Mother Earth. The ancient Earth Mother that has been around for billions and billions of years. And the Earth Mother is known as Grandmother Earth. Hence again, she's so ancient that people understand that meeting her in the Matrix, in the truth, you will understand that she is ancient, she is your grandmother. Here again we have the animism of Native Americans, where they understood that there was spirit and life force in the rocks, in the mountains, long before we were created, that are here for billions of years. And when in the Matrix, when their third eyes were open and they could see clairvoyantly, they could see this life force, these auric colors in all the plants, in the rocks, and see the deities or this consciousness that's in it. Grandmother Earth was exceptionally sacred to the Native Americans. They respected the earth, they respected everything to do with Mother Earth. And talking about Mother Earth, when these big changes are coming to Earth, it is to initiate Mother Earth in her initiation. So there will be one moment in the world that will change things for everything, and in that exact moment, Mother Earth goes through her cosmic initiation to birth the new world that is coming, the space age. I'm going to cover that subject at a later point. By hitting the notification button, will these videos come up onto your home page in the future? So please like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Welcome back to the channel. Hi, I'm Trevor if you haven't joined me before. We are moving forward from the red road of the Native Americans to the red path of the ancient Maya. How was it that the ancient Maya knew the secrets of reincarnation and how to remember their previous lives each time they reincarnated? What were these secrets of reincarnation? And tied into this was the cosmic clock. So the spiritual calendar, the Mayan calendar, is really a cosmic clock that activates in the spirit world, the place that we come from. So when one goes through one's first awakenings and rememberings, this cosmic clock activates. So in other words, your life starts to continue moving forward in the spirit realm while you're still in the physical form. Many thousands of years ago, the ancient Mayan gods and deities promised their return when our world would go through this change from the Pisces age into the space age. So let us take a look at these ancient deities and how they've actually returned to activate the contracts that they have with these souls from back thousands of years ago. And this all ties into Mayan prophecies because it was their work to make sure that we would remember our previous lives so that the work that needed to be done in the future could be fulfilled. Because there are many Mayans around the world and not all of them have had their rememberings and their awakenings. It takes something to trigger it. I'm not a prophet, I'm a clairvoyant and a seer, but I have a prophecy and I'm going to create this in a 3-part video of what is coming, and it's going to affect, like I said before, every single thing in this reality of ours. It's going to be a game changer, the day that changed the world forever, and there are markers that lead up to this one moment, so don't miss out on this. The only way to get these videos in the future is if you hit that notification button. Being subscribed doesn't necessarily mean that you will receive these videos in your feed. So you don't want to miss out on these Mayan prophecies of what is coming to our planet that will affect you, your entire family. So try not to miss out on these future prophecies because I guarantee you every single one of them, each marker until that final moment is going to manifest. Many of the things that were shown on that night have already manifested. So I'm going to bring this into its true form and share this prophecy. We're going to look at some ancient Mayan rituals. What were these strange rituals that they were performing? How was these rituals that were performed in this reality, how did it end up manifesting in the spirit world? So we're going to look at the science behind Mayanism and these very strange and interesting practices that the Mayans used to do. Let's not forget the dance of light, or the vortices or portals of light that transport souls from one point to another. Many souls travel through the portals of light or the dance of light without remembering being in the portals, and that's really how it is. So we're going to take a look at why do some people see portals and others don't, and where did these portals come from and how did they connect everything. And of course, not only was religion and spirituality central to the life of the ancient Maya, so was the usage of plants. So we're going to look at specific plants and what the ancient Maya did to allow themselves to break through the matrix into a state of higher consciousness. Plants for healing and all these other strange little things that they did. And like I said, most importantly, we're going to delve into the ancient pantheon of the Mayan deities and their return and the impact that it has in certain people's lives if you were a Mayan so many thousands of years ago. And also the ancient lost civilizations of the Serpent people of the ancient Maya. Who were these Serpent people? What is this great mystery and where did this civilization mysteriously disappear to? And then of course we're going to look at the dragons, the ancient Naga, and see the similarity of the Naga not only in India but all over the ancient world, and how the Maya were integrated into the civilization of ancient serpents or ancient dragons known as the Naga. So stay tuned for some of these exciting episodes. It may take some time to create them, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Forget everything you've been told about the Maya and human sacrifices. This isn't some Hollywood bloodbath. This is the ultimate spiritual reset. Imagine reclining on the Chac Mool, a sacred stone figure, not just a statue, but a cosmic portal between worlds. A Maya master priest stands over you, and suddenly your heart is removed, but not in the way you think. This isn't about death, it's about transformation. Your karma, your past traumas and emotional baggage are extracted, purified and reprogrammed, and when your heart returns, you're reborn. The Egyptians weighed the heart, the Aztecs went all in on blood, but the Maya, they understood the ultimate truth. The only way to truly live is to offer your heart to the gods. And I know this because I've lived it, both in this life and before. Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Trevor if you haven't joined me before. This may sound like a strange subject to look at, but isn't truth stranger than fiction? Let's dive into the most misunderstood and one of the most powerful ancient Maya rituals of all time, the Chac Mool reset. To understand this, let's get some context of the Chac Mool. Forget what you heard. Look at this image here. The Chac Mool is one of the most enigmatic and iconic figures of Mesoamerican civilization, found in Maya and Toltec sites across Mexico and Central America. Let us look at the physical description of the Chac Mool. A reclining stone figure with its head turned 90 degrees to the side, and you can see the upper body is propped up on the elbows while the knees are bent. The man holds a bowl in his stomach or chest, believed to be an offering receptacle. Looking at the name, we could actually think this is from the Mayan rain deity Chac, because it's the Chac Mool. But this is the red paw or the thundering paw. So we've got to actually think, was this name just invented by the Spanish? So whether it is the red paw or the thundering paw gives us really more like a deeper understanding of what this paw is. So this is the paw of the ancients that's coming in to extract your heart, whether it's grandfather, the plumed serpent, or some ancient being. This gives us a little bit more context and understanding of the name, that it's not maybe just by chance that they've named it something like this, the red paw or the thundering paw. Because when we meet grandfather in the Matrix, the sky's thunder. And this Maya sacred ritual is not just a sacrifice. What sacrifice really means is to make something pure, to make something holy. And this was the whole idea. And that's what sacrifice actually means to the ancient Maya. Historians got this all wrong. It wasn't murder, it was a divine initiation into transformation. Before we look at my experience, let us look at the Chac Mool. So what happens? Normally the master would extract the heart, not physically, but in the spirit world. The heart is not just removed, it is reset. Think of it as a factory reset for the soul. So on a more esoteric level, we know that within the heart there is a seed atom. So that seed atom is embedded into your heart the moment you take your first breath when you are born. And from that seed atom, the karma flows through your bloodstream. So when the master removes your heart, they recode the karma, they remove karma, they purify the heart, the emotional imprints are wiped out. Negative patterns that the personality has developed are eliminated and cleared. You don't just get your heart back, you get a new one, spiritually encoded with divine purity. The moment you return, as you breathe in, you are reborn. So when we look at the Aztecs, they took this to the extreme. One of the Aztec kings had this initiation or dream, and he misinterpreted it. And to him he felt sacrifices, real human sacrifices, needed to be made. And this is really where they started with the ancient Aztec. And then we see a similar ritual that the ancient Egyptians performed, that of Ma'at, weighing your heart. And if your heart was lighter than a feather, you were able to pass. In other words, you were able to go through that initiation. So with the Maya, the heart is reprogrammed. In Egypt, the heart is judged. Both understood that transformation happens in the spiritual world before the physical. Remember the axiom, as above, so below. The Maya weren't just performing a ritual, they were upgrading humanity one heart at a time. So let's take a look at my heart-stopping experience. I was the age of 17, and what makes the ancients, the gods or the masters, decide that they're going to do this initiation? So I suppose it would be different for everyone. So there they wanted to reset me so that I could start my spiritual path for the work that they had planned for me. In this life, this experience happened in my bed. So you can imagine waking up and you're lying in your bed, and it's quite a shock really to realize that you can feel it. There's no heartbeat and your chest cavity is open and there's no heart. And as you look up, the master is holding your heart, is reprogramming code into the divine seed atom, the heart seed atom. And when you wake up, you're in a sort of trance-like state. So in a way you can't move, but you can. But just the shock of seeing somebody holding your heart out of your body, in that moment it's just like a freak out. And then you suck your heart back into you and the chest closes up, and the ceremony, the initiation, the Chac Mool reset is over. And after this experience of being reborn or purified, you're essentially a younger version of yourself. I'm not sure physically, but as a person. One has been given a second chance, a clean slate, to start fresh, to start over. And as in ancient Mayan times, we could have done this at any age, even if you were an old man. So there is other Chac Mools where you have an old man that is sitting and turning in a direction and also has an erect penis. So you would also think, well, why would the Chac Mool have this? So when it reboots you, it reboots not only your soul, but your physical body. So that vitality, that life re-enters you, your dreams, your hopes, your youthfulness, even at an old age. So you don't need to lose your heart in love. The Maya will take care of it for you. I know for people that are not on the spiritual path, this may sound like a strange initiation. But what I also know is there's quite a few people out there that have had this experience and haven't understood what it really is. So if this video eventually gets out there, I'm hoping there are some of you that have experienced this, and you can leave a comment in the section below. And although this is the full truth of the initiation, there is still much more to it. Or should I say, there are other steps and other initiations just as severe and just as significant. So I will make a video on this in terms of how we get our heads removed or chopped off. So it's the removing of the heart. And I hope you stay tuned for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.